We live in an era where the internet has empowered the emotionally and mentally deficient to be able to raise their standard for themselves in life, potentially, by primarily using the strategy of fake it till you make it. And right now, we have an abundance of such individuals attempting to invade the space of black empowerment and to use this as a place where they fake it until they make it. Individuals of low cunning, low accomplishment, and no real benefit. And probably the worst among these type of individuals is the tongue-tied, lisp-wearing, mushed-mouthed fella in the room. Now, I've long been an advocate that you've got to beware the tongue-tied, mush-mouthed little fella in the room. They're not very mentally competent, but they are loud and ambitious, even though they lack the intellectual skills to capitalize properly on that ambition. The other problem with the little tongue-tied fella in the room is that they've spent their entire lives being ignored and ostracized because of their handicap. So when you do encounter one of these lisp-carrying individuals, he will be loud and he will constantly be demanding that you give specifically him attention, as if he's the most important thing in the room and all other items need to be pushed aside for him. He'll constantly be telling you how you need to move everyone else out of the way for him. Oh yes, and one more thing. He can't actually handle getting attention. Attention is a form of orgasmic currency to little men with inferiority complexes. And if you give them attention, they are simply going to flip out of their skulls. And we have to be wary of that. Sometime around the beginning of this year, 2019, I began having people mention a term I'd never heard before, ADOS. And they kept repeatedly asking about it. Every once in a while, I would see someone ask me what I thought of it, and I would deliberately not address it because I had been unable to determine where it came from, who started it, or what precisely it meant. I spent a very long time guarding my credibility of my name because that's been primarily the vehicle that I have presented to the public. And if I'm going to apply my name to something, it needs to be to something that I understand. And this ADOS thing, while I saw people using it, it was something I didn't understand. So I began looking into it once I actually saw that a sufficient number of people were discussing it. And I didn't like some of the things I found at the time. I found some of the things I found at the time to be very unsettling. I have always championed black excellence, and whenever I hear a Benjamin Crump type of individual who is obviously intellectually slow, who speaks with a lisp, obviously carrying some type of learning disability, I have to be careful about that, and I'm just being brutally frank with you. When you have someone, one of these, quite honestly, Al Sharpton, Benjamin Crump, Mike Tyson, lisp-ladled individuals attempting to be your spokesperson, you should really pay attention to something like that. It's good to have them as a cheerleader and a hype man following something else. But when that individual wants to pick up the band major's baton and lead the band, now we have to be apprehensive. This individual has failed to be able to lead themselves. How on earth would they possibly be able to lead other people? This is brutal reality. I'm not being prejudicial. This is math, not opinion. Now, when this term was being used, I looked into it, and I saw the individuals who had allegedly begun it, and I knew something was wrong. I knew something was wrong from the very beginning, but I didn't say anything Why not? Because we live in an internet era where giving people attention is a form of currency. They can use anything, either positive or negative. They can utilize that, especially when people bigger than them. When you have a group of people who are very little and not very significant, they desperately need people who are bigger than them to help them springboard and launch into the public consciousness. And that is exactly what occurred here. And I will be presenting the data because you need an intelligent person to present data, not an obviously intellectually incapacitated person who knows how to say the word data, but doesn't actually even know what data is or how you use it. So you will be treated to that tonight as well. To be clear, before Tariq Nasheed began using the hashtag term ADOS, it wasn't being mentioned anywhere of prominence. Tariq has a reach of millions of people. And it was only after he began using that term, ADOS, that you started seeing prominent media figures in the mainstream corporate media begin using that term. They were using it in response to him. Before then, it simply had no traction. Now, fortunately for the term ADOS, Tariq didn't have an ego about it. But unfortunately for the rest of us, the people who created the term did. It was meant to be a self-serving vehicle for themselves. And it's about time that we started asking some critical questions. I am not doing this as a part of a campaign of character assassination. I'm saying it's time for us to ask some serious questions about a couple of troublesome people who have made it their mission to attempt to sow as much discord and conflict internally as possible. This is not a house wrecking. This is a house cleaning, and it's sorely overdue. This term ADOS allegedly, and notice I keep using the term allegedly, was created by Antonio Moore and Yvette Carnell. Now, this guy, Antonio Moore, claims, well, it's very difficult to actually figure out what he claims because it really depends on what day you ask the question. However, among the many titles and accolades that he has attempted to bestow upon himself, because ego requires this, even if it's not actually true, ego requires you to keep heaping accolades on yourself, even if you don't possess them. He was low level and very harmless because no one was paying him any attention. Then ADOS caught the attention of Tariq Nasheed, and all of a sudden an individual of no accomplishment found himself getting a lot more attention. What are this guy's accomplishments? Well, if you listen to him tell it, he will immediately tell you that he is a graduate of Loyola Law School and that he was a producer on the documentary Freeway Crack in the System.
American DOS, ADOS was created out of the brain trust of myself, Antonio Moore. I'm a UCLA grad, Loyola Law School grad, nominated for an Emmy for the documentary Freeway Crack in the System.
Now, you heard what he said, but did you notice here what he did not say? He did not identify himself as a practicing attorney. He simply said, I've been to law school, and I was credited as a producer on a documentary that I hope you all have heard of. Now, the first question that came to my mind was, this guy in other places allows other people to identify him as an attorney and is sometimes claimed to be an attorney. And yet, what type of lawyer who's had a legal license for over a decade leads talking about a documentary producer credit and doesn't lead by telling you his legal accomplishments. Every attorney on earth will tell you about the cases he's litigated. He will introduce you with himself to you with the cases that he's won and the cases that he's litigated, and then he won't tell you his name, he will tell you his law offices. But not this attorney. This attorney has no interest in discussing his legal record. He has no interest in discussing his history of litigation. This is a lawyer who does not actually practice law. He's trying to fake it until he makes it. He went to law school, doesn't have very much to show for it, but it's the only thing he's actually done, so he has to mention that. And then turns around and mentions a producer credit on a documentary as if he somehow was financing it, and he was not. People, you can get a producer credit in Hollywood simply by being a friend of somebody, or if you're able to arrange an interview with somebody. You didn't get paid anything, but you can use that to demand a producer credit on a film. You don't get paid for it, but if you're trying to raise your profile because other things you've attempted to do in life didn't quite work out for you, and it's time for you to switch vehicles, then yeah, you want to get your name as elevated as you can, even if it wasn't very much that went into it. When I first started seeing that, I recognized it immediately for what it was. Now, I wasn't going to attack him over it because, hey, you got to get in where you fit in. And I'm not here to police every little insignificant person who comes along. That's not what I do. I depend on the rest of you as adults to act like adults. So if you see that somebody's resume is paper thin and highly questionable, I expect you as adults to do the due diligence necessary to debunk that. That didn't exactly happen. It didn't exactly happen because that hashtag that they made, ADOS, got picked up by Tariq, and at that point it grew wings. It became a very powerful, very potent tool in Tariq's hands by which he could push the black agenda. And the white corporate media immediately took notice because somebody significant was finally using that hashtag. Now, let us be very clear in what I'm about to say next. ADOS is the hashtag that Tariq Nasheed built. And I'm not just saying that. If you go to Social Blade and go and take a look at Tone Talks, view counts, take a look at the first big mention of ADOS. Tariq Nasheed began using it at approximately the end of the month of January 2019. Now, if you take a look at this graph here, because I have brought the data, because this is data actually used by someone with the intellectual capacity to use data, so listen very carefully. If you take a look at this graph here, you can very clearly see that the trend line is minuscule. Languishing, it's somewhere around 30,000 subscribers to begin with. And over the course of the next 6 months, had only gained a couple thousand. This was an account that was going nowhere slow. But if you look at the graph right here, at the end of January 2019, at the time when Tariq Nasheed begins using the ADOS hashtag, well, what do you know? All of a sudden, ADOS, the subscriber count for the individual who claims to have made it, all of a sudden it begins to spike. And within a matter of a little over a month, he had gotten more subscribers in a little over 1 month than he had gained in the previous 6 months. This isn't his doing. This is the doing of someone who has a much larger audience than you, actually bringing what you did to prominence. It's the same as being featured, if you're a new rapper being featured on the album of a very prominent rapper. You got lucky because you got raised up. And as you can all see from here, take a look at the trend line for the previous 6 months before Tariq had used that hashtag, and then take a look at what happens in the following 6 months. He gained more subscribers within the next month than he had the previous 6 months, and after the following 6 months, his subscriber count in total had doubled. Now, to a person who's intellectually honest with themselves, they realize that's not my doing. But to a desperate individual of low accomplishment and low cunning, he's going to try to make it seem as if this were his doing, because his ego demands it, because there really isn't anything else much going for them. Now, before anyone attempts to say that I'm just being rude or I am just being mean-spirited, let me be clear. I am saying what is factual in why it is that I made a very conscious effort not to adopt or promote the ADOS hashtag. If you'll all recall, and you can do a search on this if you want to, if you'll all recall, I have never used ADOS. I made a conscious effort to not use that. I might have retweeted something and I may have referenced it once or twice, but I made a conscious effort not to say American descendants of slaves. I found that to actually be very odd because for those of you who actually understand proper linguistics, this was actually a very bizarre phrasing of this. American descendants of slaves. Well, that's not really the way you should phrase it. I knew immediately it actually should be stated as descendants of American slaves. Because if you don't identify as American or American descendants of slaves, well, that can include non-black people. The descendants of American slaves is only referencing black people. So it seemed to me that somebody had taken that acronym and had rearranged it, but for reasons that I couldn't understand at first. So when I reference my people, I reference them properly as the descendants of American slaves. I did this deliberately because I did not want to promote the ADOS hashtag. I made a conscious, deliberate effort to not do so because I didn't trust the people using it. I didn't trust the people who had created it, and I didn't trust the origin of that rearranging of the acronym when I knew the proper use of it the proper arrangement would be descendants of American slaves. And it turns out that I was right. But it goes even further. If you go back to the beginning of 2019, you'll all remember that there was the piece that Joy Reid did on MSNBC where she had gotten that Shireen Mitchell chick to say that the people claiming and promoting ADOS were Russian bots. Now, this was factually inaccurate. Tariq's not a Russian bot, and the people who listen to him and subscribe to him are not Russian bots either. I'm one of those people. Needless to say, great offense was taken at that claim that this isn't a real thing, that these people are just Russian bots giving Kamala Harris a hard time. I noticed that, but I also noticed something else. The little fella who claimed that he had created ADOS, I noticed that he doesn't read. He doesn't actually read anything. I would expect that from somebody who's obviously struggling with a learning disability. But he doesn't actually read anything. It first came to my attention that he doesn't actually read when Sheila Jackson Lee was promoting her H.R. 40 revival of John Conyers' old bill. Now, I had taken a look at it, and immediately, first of all, Sheila Jackson Lee presenting it was highly suspicious. And when I actually read it, I certainly saw, well, this is nothing you want to promote. This is just more smoke and mirrors and a sham. But this supposed lawyer, who every once in a while, but not very often, will trumpet to you that he's been to law school and even has the nerve to attempt to criticize and denigrate other people for not having a degree. This individual showed us how much a degree or a law license from Loyola School of Law is worth, because he came out doing backflips and talking about how great it was and that we finally got reparations on the table. Now, he has since deleted those tweets, but let's be clear, he was doing backflips about that and trying to take all the credit for it. I said nothing. I realized that this little guy doesn't know how to read a law. I just let him keep going. I'm not egotistical, and I wasn't looking to burst anyone's bubble. You're trying to fake it till you make it. You just had a major faux pas. Maybe you'll recover from it. I believe in giving people time to recover. Time's up. Needless to say, after MSNBC had on Sheila Jackson Lee talking about HR 40 on Joy Reid's program, this supposed lawyer was doing somersaults and attempting to take credit about it. I waited, and I waited. And after that had occurred, I then told you all I would be doing a program where I would actually explain to you what HR 40 was, and I told everybody, fall back, this is a scam, fall back, this is a deception. It was only after I did that program that all of a sudden, Moore does a 180 and all of a sudden starts criticizing HR 40. And all of you who were tagging me and saying, hey, the ADOS founders changed their tune after you did your program. At first they were talking about this was great and they were trying to take credit for it. They changed their tune after you did your program. Well, yeah, because between the two of us, I was the only one competent enough to actually read the bill and understand it. Before I had read it, you didn't know what to do with it. So what that made clear to me at that time, for those of you who thought that I was just being mean or rude or that I am attempting to denigrate someone, these are just facts. You are dealing with a lawyer who cannot read a law. After regaling people with his supposed alleged law credentials, that incident with Sheila Jackson Lee and HR 40 of this person doing backflips over it when it was actually not anything at all, and then having to do an immediate 180, that was proof positive and confirmed that you are dealing with someone who's been to law school. You're dealing with someone who may be a lawyer, but they cannot actually read a law. Well, at this point, all types of alarm bells are going off for me. We found another Benjamin Crump. Low intellect, high ambition, super high volume to compensate for the intellectual capacity that they don't actually possess. This is not a matter of vocabulary, people. This is a matter of basic competence. An attorney who cannot read a law shouldn't be attempting to lecture anybody on what laws we should be promoting or challenging or championing. So when I have an attorney who cannot read a law telling me about the virtues of the Civil Rights Act of 1866, when he didn't even understand HR 40 of 2019, I'm asking a bunch of questions. I'm seriously hesitant, and the rest of you should be too. These are not accusations. I'm stating facts. We go ahead and we move forward. In the summer of 2019, this Moore fellow starts beating the drum super heavy about a court case that media mogul Byron Allen of Entertainment Studios had brought to the Supreme Court, suing the cable carrier Comcast. Now, in reality, Antonio Moore's only real claim to fame was that he landed an interview with Byron Allen. However, a lot of us were asking serious questions. How is it that a nondescript, totally unaccomplished, completely unremarkable Loyola Law School graduate who does not practice law was able to land an interview with a multimillionaire, and let's be clear, it is multimillionaire, not multi-billionaire, not denigrating, but let us not attempt to exaggerate or conflate. But I will later get into the fact that the lawyer who cannot read a law is also a lawyer who cannot read a business prospectus or statement. We'll come to that a little bit later. But how in the world did an unaccomplished and completely unremarkable law school graduate who does not practice law land an interview with such a significant personality as Byron Allen? And immediately I began asking myself the question, did Antonio Moore schedule an interview with Byron Allen? Or did Byron Allen select Antonio Moore and schedule an interview with him as a method to gin together some grassroots organization intended to convey the idea that there was some widespread groundswell of support from the grassroots of black society to back Byron Allen's lawsuit, when in reality, that's not really what those people are there for. We're going to come back to that as well, but I want you all to start thinking this over. Don't take my word for anything. Add up 1 + 1 and tell me if it equals 3 or if it actually equals 2. In the summer of 2019 also, P. Diddy and his AT&T corporate sponsors, in a video very brilliantly done by Professor Black Truth, had started with their Revolt Summit, which was going to supposedly discuss reparations. Professor Black Truth has already done a video where he debunked all of that and exposed it for the sham that it was. But this little fellow, Antonio Moore, took grievous exception to the fact that he wasn't invited. Well, what would you expect? When the event comes around a second time, he supposedly was invited right before he found himself uninvited. He took grievous exception to that as well. He also took to mentioning my name. A fella that I've taken great pains not to reference. He mentioned my name. He mentioned my name as being supportive of ADOS. This was completely untrue. As I've already explained, I did not support ADOS. I support the descendants of American slaves. I did one YouTube video where I examined the Killer Mike interview talking to Antonio Moore, but that was all I did. I was discussing, and if you listen to that video, you see that I keep referencing it as descendants of American slaves, as I've always done. I did not support Antonio Moore. I didn't support their organization, and I wasn't endorsing him to go speak to anybody because he's not competent or capable. His interview on Al Jazeera television is proof that if you put him in front of a microphone, he's really only going to meander, wander, babble, and embarrass himself, but he will not make a coherent, concise argument. How's that for law school? Needless to say, after he didn't get the nod from Revolt TV, he then began demonstrating why he didn't get it. Now, he goes off on a screed where he begins insulting everyone with the exception of Killer Mike, even though many of the criticisms he leveled against other people applied to Killer Mike. In particular, I found it to be really, really odd that he would say that we shouldn't listen to T.I. or Jay Morrison because they don't have a degree.
People will say, why don't you sit down with T.I.? It's him just moving and get the hell out the way. You don't know what you're talking about. I don't need to talk to him. I need him to move out of the way so that Black America can be awakened to the truth of their situation. I need him to understand your rap career is your career. If it's not here now, I don't need you talking politics. because you don't know what you're talking about. I need you to understand that when you look at wealth stratified across Black America, we only have $3 trillion. There's $107 trillion in household wealth. White folks have 100. We only have 3, right? That means effectively he does not understand what the hell you're going through. Let me say it again. He is a wealth hoarder. You have a wealth hoarder telling you about reparations that didn't graduate from college. I don't even know if he went. I'm just telling you he can't speak to this.
Number one, as if having a degree qualifies you as an authority on reparations, the ability to count and know basic history qualifies anyone to speak on reparations. Number two, take a look at the lawyer who cannot read a law. So much for the value of having a degree. But the other thing that should strike us all as odd, T.I. Harris is a mega multimillionaire. He's not hurting for any money anywhere. That's why people want to speak to him. His name alone is worth money. That's a demonstration of just how significant his accomplishments are. How in the world can he possibly be criticized by a little fella who has no money, no finances, lives a very modest existence, and T.I. could buy and sell him and his entire family several times over? I say this to make the following point. Am I going to listen to a guy who went to law school and hasn't been able to make a dime as a lawyer? Or am I going to listen to a rapper who went into the music business and has made multiple millions in the music business? Both of you applied yourselves to something in life. You applied yourself to the law and failed to make a living at it. T.I. applied himself to the music business and has done phenomenally well. Who am I supposed to listen to? And let us be clear, any hamster can graduate from law school. The real question is, can you actually make money as a lawyer out here in the real world? Before you're going to criticize T.I. Harris, we first need to ask you, where's your authority to speak? For a man, to speak critically of a man who could buy and sell you and everything you have 1,000 times over. You have to suspend reality and common sense, basic logic and reasoning to give credibility to the guy who doesn't have 2 pennies to rub together, telling you that we're at a summit about reparations, which is economics, that you shouldn't listen to the multimillionaire who's self-built. You should listen to the failed law graduate who has made no money for anybody, including himself. I am not attacking. I am saying that if this is not true, if what I just said is not factual, then present me the evidence that it's not factual. Don't present me with, hey, that's kind of rude to say. It's not rude to say, how is a guy with no money going to come to a summit, specifically speaking about money, and criticize someone? T.I. Harris has made a multimillionaire of himself and other people. Even non-black people. Shout out Iggy Azalea. Antonio Moore has not made a dime for anybody, including Antonio Moore. So you would have to be out of your mind and irrational to give more credence to an individual who is a financial failure than to someone who is a financial super success. His only real claim to fame, as far as knowing someone who's a super success, is to say Byron Allen. Byron Allen's money did not come from his degree. If Byron Allen has been to college, his money didn't come from a degree. So once again, it's nonsensical and irrational to sit up here and say that. Yeah, to someone who's not thinking, bringing up, these guys ain't got a degree. Well, yes, that deflects, but it doesn't actually give credibility to what you're saying. Your degree hasn't done a thing for you financially. Maybe we need to listen to people with actual accomplishments and not people waving around failed paperwork. No shade, no shots fired. 1 + 1 = 2. If you're going to hate on T.I. Harris, you need to demonstrate to us where you are more knowledgeable about the subject matter than T.I. Harris. When it comes to building wealth, you don't have what it takes to carry the napkin that T.I. Harris blew his nose with. Much less misleading people by telling them that you're somehow more of an authority on money making and entrepreneurship than T.I. Harris is. Let's be clear. If Byron Allen had a choice between entering a deal with Antonio Moore or T.I., he's going to choose T.I. every single time. The guy that you've been swinging on the coattails of and using his name dropping every chance you get because he's got accomplishments and you don't. He wouldn't even do business with you. He would go to the guy you just said, well, he ain't got a degree. And Byron Allen would step over your unconscious body to go do business with him. Is there anybody who doubts that? Your lawyer, who doesn't know how to read a law, didn't know that. But then again, Benjamin Crump type of individuals, that's where they stay. That's where they live their lives. Now we move forward to more recent events. Now that I've explained all of that to you all, we move forward to more recent events. It had been announced that the New York Times a writer for the New York Times, Farrah Stockman, wanted to do an article about ADOS. Now that presidential candidates were falling left and right because they were not embracing the black agenda, ADOS became a metaphor for the black agenda, not for two individuals. It became a metaphor for the black agenda. Reparations is not merely financial, it's first and foremost financial. But there are a number of different levels of reparations that we as black people are owed in this society. Your lawyer who cannot read a law has never articulated that. We articulate it weekly here at the Black Channel and have several times before with talking points that your lawyer who cannot read a law wound up adopting. Ain't that right, HR 40? So, in the month of November 2019, the New York Times published an article that was so incredibly disrespectful, that was so venomous, that was absolutely so acidic and vociferous, that no sensible individual who claims to support the descendants of slaves movement could possibly say anything good about it. This piece absolutely demonized anyone and everyone associated with ADOS. Farrah Stockman put together what was calculated, calibrated, and engineered to be a devastating smear campaign against everyone and anyone not just associated with ADOS, but who backs it and agrees with it. She painted ADOS as white supremacist. She painted it as xenophobic. She painted it as racist, as if she even tried to she stated that you're a Trump supporter. She ripped it for everything from the sun coming up to the sun going down. What did your mush-mouthed, tongue-tied attorneys say about this piece? Well, if you take a look on the screen, he had quite a bit to say. Now, didn't he? All of it applauding the New York Times. And once again, this ego-starved individual began doing backflips. Merely because the New York Times mentioned him, he was telling everybody, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me. He didn't say look at the agenda. It was about look at me. We here. When he says we, he's referring to himself and his partner. He's not referring to black people. But furthermore, how ADHD do you have to be to do backflips over an article that calls you everything except a child of God? Did you even actually read the article? Brothers and sisters from around the world, no, he didn't actually even read it. I doubt he would understand most of it, even if he did. I doubt if he would be able to make his way through the language or grammar, even if he attempted to read it. But it was very clear that just like HR 40 and just like the Revolt Summit, you're dealing with a lawyer who cannot read a law. You are dealing with an attorney who cannot read a business statement, and you are dealing with a lawyer who cannot decipher a newspaper article. And yet he's going to be the voice of authority on legal matters? He was applauding a New York Times article that ripped him to shreds. So the question becomes, what's his real purpose for being here? What's his real motive? It clearly isn't to promote what it is he claims he's promoting. Otherwise, you wouldn't be congratulating the New York Times. Oh, yes, and personally congratulating the author and thanking her for showing up at their ADOS convention. People, I'm not making this up. He didn't know it. He didn't understand it. He didn't read it. He's clueless. I didn't even take him to task then. When I saw it and I read it and I saw what he was doing, I didn't say anything then. Well, Jason, why didn't you say nothing then? Why is you saying something now? Because I'm at war and I am doing what a commander on a battlefield does. I am picking and choosing my battles. To a desperate individual of low accomplishment and low intellect, he's got to talk about everything, and he runs around like a chicken with his head half sliced off, attempting to get notoriety. I'm not trying to win notoriety. I'm trying to win a war. I have no time to sit up here and pick the small battles. I've got to win the significant conflicts. I'm not trying to build a name for myself. I'm trying to build a nation. And you cannot do that when your commanders are easily distracted by every little skirmish that comes along. Needless to say, after the article was published, I witnessed something of such a low-down nature occur that I realized what was happening. When you are dealing with mushmouth, tongue-tied, low-intellect individuals, and I'm not saying that as a personal insult or attack, I am describing physical characteristics. When you are dealing with individuals of low accomplishment, the first thing that they're going to try to do is raise their profile. This guy has done this several times, as you can see, as I've explained to you and illustrated, by attacking people of much bigger accomplishment than himself and attempting to claim that somehow he's better than them. When the New York Times article was published, right after that, Antonio Moore goes on an unprovoked attack on Tariq Nasheed, just like his unprovoked attack on T.I., and the list goes on. He goes around launching unprovoked attacks on people because he's desperate for notoriety. He needs to keep his name out there. But more importantly, he's not attempting to promote a black agenda. He wants to promote himself. So any feedback he can get from people, he tries to use that to his advantage, and then tries to tell people that if you don't back him in attacking other people, you ain't keeping it real. You ain't keeping ghetto mess going. You ain't keeping it real. Let's be very clear. Supporting black people is keeping it real. Supporting an obvious phony individual with ulterior motives, that ain't keeping it real. That's keeping it fake as hell. Tariq Nasheed did absolutely nothing to deserve such an unprovoked, vicious assault. Tariq Nasheed put up a post on Twitter attacking the Democratic Party and using Donald Trump's actions as the means to do that. Antonio Moore, out of nowhere, attempts to attack Tariq for this, directly assaulting him in public, not behind closed doors. So if anyone has a problem with that, with me saying something openly here, first and foremost, ask Antonio, why didn't you address this? If you had questions like that, why come out and attack Tariq? Why didn't you actually find something out and address this behind closed doors? But the reason for that is because that was the entire point. This guy can't get the traction that he wants to have. It was a New York Times article that he wanted to try to claim that he was solely responsible for, but then they gave him the grievous insult of specifically interviewing and mentioning Tariq Nasheed. Well, this little broken-egoed individual couldn't handle it because he realized that people didn't really care about him. They were concerned about the movement, not him. And he wanted to get attention back on himself. Tariq was in the way of this. So even though he has no credibility, no standing, the little guy with the lisp decided he was going to attack Tariq and attempt to claim that Tariq was somehow supporting Donald Trump, when very clearly it was clear that Tariq was attacking the Democrats. Now, you have an attorney, yes, I'm going to say it again. You have an attorney who cannot read a law. You have a supposed attorney who cannot understand a business agreement. You have a supposed attorney who cannot decipher a newspaper article. And now you have a supposed attorney who is incapable of following the construction of a simple sentence on Twitter. People, at some point, you can't keep saying, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. You cannot keep extending the benefit of the doubt once there is no longer any doubt. And we are no longer in doubt. I saw this occurring and I was witnessing it, and I had immediately made the calculation that this is a situation of an individual who is attempting to do the bidding of other people, what they have instructed, and they are also attempting to elevate themselves at the expense of people better than themselves. So I also understood that if I said something directly addressing them, that would play into their hands, because a lot of attention was on them because of the New York Times article, and they were trying to parlay that article into greater attention for themselves. If I had launched into a tirade then my bigger platform would have been used to elevate this person. I did not want that to occur. So what I did was I gave a statement reminding the people that these are tactics that have been used against us before. When I mentioned Roy Karanga, I mentioned Karanga specifically because of this little tongue-tied individual. Yes, I mentioned it specifically. But I was not going to allow them to use this as some sort of rap beef that helps to sustain their raised profile. I was not willing to do that. I took it to the people and reminded the people of what the standard is, not what I say. I reminded the people of what the standard is. And when you see an individual who goes about constantly, relentlessly attempting to promote themselves, everything is about their ego. They spend 10% of their time promoting your cause and the rest of the time making sure that they mention themselves and talk about themselves. And then they start attacking other people because they are not getting as much attention as they wish they could get. That is dangerous. And I wanted to remind the people about the evils of ego. I reminded the people of what selfless servitude looks like, and sounds like, and feels like. I challenge any one of you to listen to any of his videos and you tell me, did you get that same feeling of esteem and of selfless gratitude that you got when you listen to me talk about surrendering your ego as when you listen to this guy's videos? Do his videos give you that same feeling that you are serving a selfless cause and the pride that you carried with it when you heard me talk about it? Or do you feel something else? I'm not going to answer that question for you. You need to search your own heart for that answer. But you know what you felt when you heard me talking about that. And I'm challenging you now. Don't live under any more illusions. You know what you felt. You know what the real thing feels like. Listen to that. Don't listen to me, and damn sure don't listen to him. Listen to what you know is true. Now, in all candor, I knew that there were problems months and months ago. Well, Jason, what did you do about it? When I realized that this little character had been mentioning me, I attempted to contact them privately. I wanted to talk to them away from other people because that is the way in which you do it. I wanted to let him know that you're not very accomplished and you're so obviously struggling and desperate for attention. I don't know who brought you to this, and I don't know who put you up to this, although I suspect Byron Allen plays a very large hand in it. You have an opportunity, however, to abandon this nonsense that brought you here and actually dedicate yourself to something worthwhile. You have a rare opportunity among men and among people to do that. I wanted to let him know that he was squandering that opportunity. I have done this with several other people before. Every time it has been swatted away, but I've given them the opportunity. I have always spoken to them in private. I did not alert them that they were doing the wrong thing in public. I have let them know privately. This individual was so scared that he didn't respond to anything. It was known that he knew that he was being contacted, but he didn't want to respond. And we know why. I was giving him every opportunity to do so. But you've got to understand, real recognizes real, but fake recognizes fake as well. And if you don't have anything else to bargain with, this is the way it's going to turn out. Now, it was after this event with Tariq of attacking him that then Antonio puts out a video attacking me. Now, let us be very, very clear. As I just explained to you, this guy knew that he was being contacted by me, but he was on the run. That was not accidental. He kept mentioning my name, but then he refused to speak to me directly. So when he made his video, he wasn't just having Freudian slips. He was doing it deliberately.
This is about reparations and a black agenda at its core, but it also is about who will be the next president. When you look, you have to understand the level we're playing at now after that New York Times article. Again, a lot of people don't know politics. They didn't understand what that does. Is Obama was talking to us when he actually said what he said on the Vox article. He understands that we're gonna set the dialogue. We have people we went from the New York Times as ADOS to having people on the steps of the Supreme Court. We a problem now. And when I say that, I mean that in a real good way, because for so long, everybody has said, well, y'all just get organized. Now that we organize, you got Jason Black calling us right wing. You got Tariq Nasheed calling us left wing. You got everybody trying to figure out what ADOS is going to do. But what we about to do is clear it all up today. So I want to have this discussion because I think it's necessary, because it goes from everything from saying we support Isaiah Washington with Jason Black, who I believe is like a crackpot. He really doesn't know nothing. Him and Yvette Nicole Brown, just talking.
He did it deliberately. No, you did not mistake me with some news commentator. That was deliberately done and put out there for the purposes of goading me into an attack, because you thought that was going to happen when you attacked Tariq. You realized that when I was talking about ego, that was straight directed at you, and then you decided, well, I need to try something else. That blew up in his face. And I didn't say anything because, as Sun Tzu taught everybody, you never respond the way in which your enemy expects you to respond. You wanted me to respond to you immediately. No, I will take this up at a time and place of my choosing, if I take it up at all, and I chose not to. People were letting me know that Antonio had attacked me. I then let everyone else know that I was aware of it. Antonio then, after a month of ignoring contact by me or my people, then gets on Twitter and sends me a private message claiming that this was all a big misunderstanding and that he didn't mean for that to happen and it was all a mistake. So suddenly the attorney, who can't read a law, can't read a business statement, can't figure out economics, can't decipher a newspaper article, and can't understand the construction of a simple sentence, somehow he found his Twitter account. Well, the message is part of it anyway. And amazingly was able to find my message, which, as you can see, was simply sitting there for months. Well, it was sitting there for weeks. I responded to him basically saying better late than never, but that more importantly than anything, yeah, we do need to talk. Not just about what you've done, but we need to have a discussion here, because you're a guy who is so clearly sowing dissension, and somebody needs to pull your coat and let you know that this isn't going to be stood for. I have been trying to do this long before the situation with Tariq had occurred. I have my documentation. I don't just bring receipts, I bring invoices. I don't just tell you what you paid, I tell you what you owe. And this guy owes a lot. He then refuses to speak, and in behavior that was so incredibly reminiscent of Richard Aoki, the Asian Black Panther, who had infiltrated the Black Panther Party and we all know now was an FBI informant. This guy, all of a sudden, in an area and a realm where we don't trade hard copy documentation, he says he wants to see a picture of me. Now, understand something. An attorney doesn't need a picture of somebody who hires them. Although we've also determined that this is an attorney who doesn't practice law, so maybe he's never had to do that and didn't realize that, oh yeah, that's the way that works. But furthermore, buddy, you were talking about me. You've been mentioning me. You had no problem with my name in your mouth when you thought you could use it to promote yourself. When you thought that you could use it to ingratiate yourself, you had no problem invoking my name. It was only when I contacted you that all of a sudden you have a problem with speaking to me when you spent months speaking about me as if somehow I was endorsing you. No, you have to prove to me that you are a reputable person. I don't have anything to prove to you. I'm not name dropping you to anybody as proof that I'm a credible person. You were name dropping me and Tariq Nasheed as proof that you were a credible person, when I had never said anything of the sort. So yeah, you need to validate yourself to me. You have no problem using my name. If you think there's a problem with me, then why in the world are you running around publicly, repeatedly using my name? This sounds very suspect and very agent-like. And with this relentless defense of the Democratic Party, it's all starting to come together. 1 + 1 sure does seem like it equals 2. Well, as you can see, I didn't have anything else to say after that. I had nothing else to say. But we're here tonight because all the pieces and all the chips have fallen into place. With this Comcast case, let me construct for you, based upon the evidence, let me construct for you what I see. You have a failed law school graduate who doesn't have any money, doesn't have any accomplishments. He has no prospects. He's not gaining any traction in life whatsoever. But he does have a loud mouth and he's easily disposable. And in the hands of a multimillionaire who realizes he has no public support, he can take such an unaccomplished little fella who is desperate for any type of validation or progress in life. And this multimillionaire media mogul, stop me if this scenario doesn't sound plausible and doesn't line up with the events as we're seeing them unfold. This multimillionaire mogul grabbed this gullible, low intellect individual, said, well, he does have a credential. He is an attorney. Even if he's never practiced law, and even if he's never litigated a case, nothing anyone wants to talk about, if he ever has. Can anyone show us proof he's ever litigated a case? And if so, was it anything other than a slip and fall for $500? But this multimillionaire could take this little fella, claim he's got a law degree, and that would be the justification for speaking with him. Now, is he a corporate lawyer? Does he handle corporate law? Does he handle constitutional law? If you're filing a case about the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and our civil rights, is he a civil rights attorney? If so, is he a civil rights attorney of any note? What has he won? What has he accomplished? What is the expertise and authority upon which he speaks? All we know is he went to law school and then it's a blank sheet of paper after that. So this multimillionaire mogul sees how he can use this little individual who is highly disposable. It doesn't matter how big of a monkey he makes of himself because he can be easily discarded. But this guy's got a big mouth and he's willing to go out and say anything you want him to say. And he's going to work overtime because he wants to be Byron Allen's best bud because literally there's nothing else happening for him in life. So he goes off and the plan is we need to create a social movement to galvanize black people because Byron Allen has no black support. Accomplished businessman, but he has no black support. And when you're getting into courts and politics, having influence among the people matters for a lot. But Byron doesn't have any influence among the people. So you send out the little, could have been an attorney, want to be an attorney, but wasn't. And you tell him, you know, it'd be really great if we had a vehicle with which we could promote this issue. And you tell the little wannabe attorney that this is something really important to you. And Mr. Wannabe Attorney is so desperate to get raised up and elevated in life, he makes this his cause to back because he knows there ain't nothing else coming. But you need something different to smuggle in Byron Allen's agenda. Because Byron Allen's agenda by itself is irrelevant. It means nothing to black people. You need something else with which to smuggle it in. And that's when we start promoting this ADOS. You all can take a look at the timeline. Take a look at the timeline of events. Contact with Byron Allen, interview Byron Allen, promoting ADOS, promoting Byron Allen's case. You can see the timeline. You all tell me, is there anything that isn't fitting in this timeline as I'm giving it to you? So we start promoting ADOS in 2018, and then it gets picked up. You start promoting it relentlessly. It ain't gaining any traction until Tariq Nasheed picks it up in 2019. You then begin banging the drum super heavy for ADOS. It's about ADOS. And then after people start galvanizing behind ADOS, you then tell them, and a part of the ADOS agenda is Byron Allen's lawsuit. So I need all of my ADOS people to show up at the Supreme Court so that you can help us support Byron Allen's lawsuit. A lawsuit that has absolutely nothing to do with the descendants of American slaves. Jason, how can you say that? It was a statute made right after the end of slavery in America, at least the end of chattel slavery in America. How can you say that? Brothers and sisters from around the world, I have one question I want to ask you. Something that the mush-mouthed, tongue-tied law school grad who almost was an attorney but cannot read a law hasn't said. I have one question, and if you want to shut me down right here, you can do that. I've watched several interviews that Byron Allen has done regarding his lawsuit against Comcast and invoking the Civil Rights Act of 1866. But there's one thing I did not hear Byron Allen say in any of those interviews. I did not hear Byron Allen say a word about the descendants of American slaves and that this is somehow related or relevant to the descendants of American slaves. Brothers and sisters from around the world, and those of you that you are good people, and I know you are, you're good people, you are well-intentioned. But brothers and sisters, if Byron Allen's lawsuit is related to ADOS, then please explain to me why it is that Byron Allen has never said that his lawsuit is related to ADOS. This isn't Jason Black talking. I'm asking you, if this lawsuit is really germane and is really associated with the descendants of American slaves, why isn't Byron Allen saying that? If that's really true, shouldn't Byron Allen be saying that? When Byron Allen picked up the bullhorn and was addressing people on the steps of the Supreme Court in that obvious this photo opportunity, which was arranged by Byron's little buddy, Antonio, because Byron did not have the clout or influence in black society to get 5 people to show up at the Supreme Court. But he put together someone totally unassociated to himself or disconnected to his business who would seem a lot more genuine and a lot more credible to take care of that part for him. So under the guise of protecting the interests of the descendants of American slaves, you've then diverted the agenda from the American slaves to Byron Allen's lawsuit and claiming that there's some tangential connection between the Civil Rights Act of 1866, Byron Allen, and the descendants of American slaves getting reparations. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 has nothing to do with reparations. Doesn't really have anything to do with the descendants of American slaves at this point. And it certainly doesn't have anything to do with protecting Byron Allen as being a part of our interests. That doesn't mean that Byron Allen's lawsuit is not without merit. Or that doesn't mean that Byron Allen's lawsuit is without merit. That's not what that means. But his lawsuit has nothing to do with the interests of the descendants of American slaves. And to attempt to smuggle in support for his lawsuit with the dishonest, disingenuous, fraudulent argument that this is protecting the descendants of American slaves' interests is absolutely preposterous. I know I'm using a lot of 3-syllable words here, so our lawyer friend might be just totally thrown off and he's probably given up, but that's okay. Notice I haven't said anything that will be specifically refuted. Not a word. If this lawsuit by Byron Allen is about the descendants of American slaves and is based upon the descendants of American slaves and is significant to the descendants of American slaves, why is Byron Allen not going on his interviews and saying that? He's talking about himself. He's talking about Comcast. He's talking about civil rights. He didn't say anything to Charlemagne and the Breakfast Club about descendants of American slaves. Didn't say anything to Roland Martin either. Didn't say anything to Bloomberg. And we can go down the list. The only person who claims that Byron Allen's lawsuit is germane or associated to the descendants of American slaves is Byron Allen's front person, Antonio Moore. But Byron Allen himself isn't even saying that. And oh yeah, since Tariq Nasheed started saying it, Byron Allen's not going around saying that either. He's arguing about the Civil Rights Act of 1866. He isn't saying, and this is significant for the descendants of American slaves. People, if Byron Allen isn't arguing and fighting for specifically the descendants of American slaves, then please explain to me, ADOS people, why are you fighting for him? If Byron Allen refuses to represent the descendants of American slaves, brothers and sisters, why are you hurting yourselves to defend him? Well, Jason, I ain't defending him, I'm defending the law. Okay, first of all, we have no protections under the Civil Rights Act of 1866. I believe the Supreme Court is only entertaining this so that they can make it clear and codified under precedent that you're not protected by it. So they really want to set a precedent so that this doesn't have to come up ever again, while the dominant society still has the ability to say, oh yeah, that pesky little Civil Rights Act of 1866. Not only have the courts never, ever acknowledged it, not only have the courts never upheld it, they've certainly never defended black people with it. We're going to make sure that we pass a Supreme Court precedent that we don't uphold it either. The courts have never substantiated it, and we won't either. Don't worry, your lawyer who can't read a law probably ain't going to tell you that part either. But that wasn't what he was picked for. He was picked because it's not very bright, it's not very accomplished, it's not very good, but he is very dedicated and very persistent. And besides, he ain't got nothing else going on. Why not? I don't say that as a knock or a diss, people. I'm saying it's time for some cold hard facts and reality. Why is it that two little individuals are responsible for so much turmoil? ADOS is a valid cause, which is why Antonio Moore did not create it. Someone else did. Antonio Moore took DOAS, stole the idea because he doesn't have any ideas of his own. Check his resume. Show me where he's come up with a business idea of his own. Show me where he's come up with a film idea of his own. He's raised those things as his accolades. Show me where he's come up with a law practice of his own. Show me where he has championed a lawsuit of his own. I'm not throwing shots at anybody. I'm asking you questions. Simply present it to me and say, Jason, you're wrong. Here's the documentation. You're wrong. He's had plenty of good ideas all of his own. So it shouldn't be shocking or surprising to find out that this really did begin as what we all knew the proper pronunciation of that acronym would be, Descendants of American Slaves. And lo and behold, somebody has come out and it's clearly stated, yeah, we started this as Descendants of American Slaves. We've been in contact with this Antonio Moore. Next thing we know, he comes back with American Descendants of Slaves, which is so very clearly just a rearranging of the acronym under the assumption that somehow you're creating something that people won't trace back to where it came from. And that didn't work out either. People, being a descendant of American slaves, there's a legitimate cause here. I am still, as I have always been, at the wheel and lending my strength to the cause of the descendants of American slaves. I was talking about it way before it was cool. Dr. Claude Anderson talked about it way before me. This jackalope did not invent it. I'm not going to give credit to that. As far as coming up with a hashtag that got Tariq Nasheed's attention so that Tariq Nasheed could package it and distribute it to the masses, that worked out great. You don't really have anything to do with it. And you're trying to reinsert yourself into a conversation that you have nothing to contribute to. And that brings me to the biggest and most significant flaw in this entire thing. People, what is ADOS about? Now, that's a very simple question, and you should be able to substantiate that to me. What is ADOS about? Allegedly. Well, allegedly, ADOS is about reparations, and that black people are an oppressed people in America because we are economically disadvantaged because of the evils of slavery that were never repaired, primarily economically. We are economically devastated because we were physically and economically enslaved, and after the physical enslavement ended, the economic slavery continued. Now that's really what you all are going to say. It's about reparations. Brothers and sisters, what is reparations? Let's be very clear. Antonio Moore had no real definition for reparations. It wasn't until the Black Channel actually said that reparations can only be defined as money. Then they started saying that. Let's be clear. We made it where that was the standard. And I don't need to take credit for it. I've never tried to take credit for it and make it an ego thing. I've never started off videos saying I was the one who said that reparations can only be money. I don't do that. I don't care who carries the ball, so long as my team makes it to the end zone. I don't give a damn who carries the ball. Lawyers who can't read a law, they need to have their name on things because otherwise they would disappear into obscurity. And without a name, they don't actually have any way to support themselves. But let's be clear. ADOS, you've been told that ADOS is about economic reparations. But I challenge you to take a look at the two people who supposedly founded ADOS and tell me what are their credentials to speak on economics. Now that's a very simple question. Other than tons and tons of student debt, what are their credentials to lecture the rest of us on what is economic progress? This is why hearing you attempt to impugn the character of T.I. Harris and even P. Diddy is so laughable. You're a financial failure attempting to pass off the fraud that you're able to speak on people who have done way better than you. What are your credentials to speak on these people? What's your justification? With what authority do you criticize T.I. or P. Diddy or anybody else? What's your authority to do that with? To criticize Tariq Nasheed? What's your authority to criticize economically anybody? Boyce Watkins? Where's your standing? What have you accomplished that demonstrates that you are an authority to be able to criticize other people on economics, on money, on entrepreneurship, other than being Byron Allen's texting buddy? And oh yeah, Byron ain't made a millionaire out of you. Far as we can tell, you haven't made anything. You spent a bunch of money for Allen, haven't seen where Allen's helped you get anything. So even with a relationship with a mega multimillionaire, you haven't been able to parlay that into anything other than being the mega multimillionaire's gopher. I'm not being mean. I'm saying, brothers and sisters from around the world, is 1 + 1 equaling 2? Or are you still saying it equals 3? If I'm wrong, you all can just say, Jason, this is incorrect. Here are the facts. Don't say, Jason, this is tough for me to hear. It's hard for me to hear. It's hard to hear. That's not going to fly. Show me where it's inaccurate. Otherwise, stop having cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the resort of cowards. I am here to cultivate lions, not cowards. Let us say it plainly. The truth of the matter is that what you have is an unaccomplished 35-year-old financial failure who is venting at 30-something and 40-something-year-old black men who are financial successes. And he feels very bad about that, which is why he keeps launching these unprovoked attacks rather than focusing on what supposedly was the mission, ADOS. He keeps stopping and launching these unprovoked attacks. And the one thing that those people have in common is they've all done better than him. This woman in the New York Times, Farrah Stockman, her article was ripping ADOS to shreds. This clown sat here and thanked her for doing it. And I'm calling on all of the ADOS supporters, do not ignore this. Don't ignore this. It is clearly sitting in front of your face. A lot of you latch on to things and you treat like the pastor at church. You don't have to abandon being a descendant of slaves. You don't have a choice in the matter. You don't have to abandon the cause of reparations. You don't have a choice in the matter. But you cannot allow false prophets to be your spokesman or your leaders. Take what you need, discard the rest. You got ADOS, dump the dead weight. These two gotta go. And the reason that they have to go is because their entire ADOS agenda is a fraud. It's a fraud. Jason, how do you know? Because Yvette Carnell has made a bunch of videos where she is anti-capitalism. That was one of her major arguments against Boyce Watkins, was that capitalism doesn't work. Economics is not the answer. We need politics to give us something. Because economics is not the answer. And you've never heard Antonio Moore say that either. So people, if you're promoting reparations as defined by the ADOS duo, what exactly are you promoting? From a couple of people who outright tell you that capitalism doesn't work and economics isn't the answer. Brothers and sisters, if reparations isn't about economics, then what in the world is reparations about? If we are not here, if we're saying that the reason black people are being oppressed is because we are economically disadvantaged and we need reparations, but then the dynamic duo who are supposedly leading your ADOS movement tell you that, oh, but economics doesn't work and capitalism don't work, then what are the reparations going to be? Why do we need reparations if economics doesn't work? That's the question I'm asking you. Oh, don't expect them to address that either and say, well, capitalism don't work, but big ups to Byron Allen. Capitalism doesn't work, but big ups to Killer Mike. Capitalism doesn't work, but white society's doing great, and we need reparations because capitalism and economics don't work, which is why we need more capitalism and economics among black people. Because capitalism and economics don't work. You can go look those videos up for yourself. They're over a year old. You see, when no one was paying attention, they were saying what they really meant. But now that people are paying attention, they started altering what they've been saying. Brothers and sisters, we have been consistent here. At the Black Channel, in the New Black Media, in Intelligent Black Society, we have been consistent. We have never told you that the answer was anything other than economics and capitalism. I put together the first groundbreaking documentary in history that specifically dealt with that and nothing else. By the way, has your alleged, and you notice I keep using that word, your alleged documentary producer, has he ever produced a documentary dealing with anything? His only the only thing that he was ever even tangentially associated with, and please stop trying to magnify your importance. You only got a producer credit because somebody got strong-armed into it somehow. You don't pay for anything. And by the way, if you were that significant in documentaries, why is it you've never made another one? And you have the nerve to try to speak badly on those of us who are the only ones who can. What are your accomplishments? Okay, never mind. You're such a great documentary producer that you've never produced a documentary yourself. You're trying to fake it until you make it. And you're not making it so well either. If what I'm saying is wrong, people, surely produce the documentation, show us the accomplishments, and then just say, Jason Black's got egg all over his face. This should be very simple to do. If someone attempted to say that I was not a documentary filmmaker or a producer, they would be able to produce that very easily. I would be able to produce evidence to the contrary very easily. 1 + 1 would equal 7 or 8. It wouldn't equal 2. But what I show you is going to add up every time. I've seen this story before. I've seen this movie before. You got these street dudes who they come from very poor backgrounds, and I'm not impugning that. There's nothing wrong with being from a poor background. That gives you an opportunity to raise yourself up. But individuals of very low means, individuals of very low resources, individuals of very low intellectual capital who are thrust into a world that rewards intellectual capital. They're not the sharpest tool in the shed. They're not the brightest dude, but they got to make something of themselves. So they go to law school with their tenuous grasp on the English language into a profession that requires mastery of the English language. But what do you do when you're in a profession that requires mastery of the English language and you ain't mastered it? You're going to have a hard time and a hard way to go. Now you've got a law degree, but it's very clear from the moment that you open your mouth, you don't have a mastery of any of this. But you got to push the bluff. You got to bluff your way through it. And that's where you are now. And notice I didn't knock it because this ain't no hustle. Don't knock the hustle. This isn't a hustle. This is a sham. But maybe you'll figure out a better way and get your act together. So I'm not going to kick you while you're down or trying to get yourself raised up. You need to figure out that this way doesn't work. But when you start extending into other areas and become a disruption at this critical juncture in our history, that's not going to be something I'm going to stand by. I'm going to deal with it. Even if I don't come out with guns blazing, it's going to be addressed. Brothers and sisters who've been following ADOS, you don't have to abandon the reparations movement. I continue to be at the vanguard of the reparations movement where I've always been. I will continue to confront the white supremacist media. I won't beg for an interview in the New York Times. I create my own media vehicles. I won't claim that a YouTube channel is the vehicle. The people around the nation, around the world who've witnessed the work and are now using the vocabulary and the terms as we put them out, as we define them, the message has gotten through. Not for my ego, but for my people. I'm not relying on some white media outlet to give me time. And I'm not complaining that Revolt didn't invite me. And while we're on the subject of unreliable information from this individual, you'd also be well advised to be wary of any other people that this individual endorses. For example, this Professor William Darity of Duke University that's so highly touted by Antonio Moore. Remember when I did my broadcast criticizing Cory Booker because Cory Booker was proposing a rising tide that lifts all boats strategy, but specifically ignores black people specifically. The only thing he offered was so-called baby bonds. But remember, I had two problems with that. Number one, they wanted to extend the program to all Americans. And number two, this doesn't actually solve black people's economic illiteracy problem. All it is basically a form of an insurance policy that will be administered by the government. So once again, these people are acknowledging that we are economically oppressed, but they have no clue whatsoever about how to solve the economic problem except turn it over to the government, the same government that put us in this position. Let's face the facts. You have a lawyer who cannot read a law, who is endorsing academics on economics, who do not understand how to fix our economic situation. They only know how to tell you situation's bad, but why should we be surprised? You can't expect someone who is an entrepreneurial illiterate to be able to help you become an entrepreneur. And that's what black society needs. We need an entrepreneurial class, not an academic observer class who seeks to outsource our liberation to the government. Cross your fingers and then hope for the best from the loving charitable arms of Uncle Sam. The reason that Tariq Nasheed created his own acronym is because he didn't trust the two people who created ADOS, but he understood that people make hay off of starting beefs with him. And unfortunately, and I'm going to say this straight out, unfortunately, people like me and Tariq have unfortunately not been able to depend on the general public to recognize when other people ain't up to code, and that those people are trying to create a situation where they can make hay out of beefing with people on a higher level than themselves. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to depend on the general public to take care of that on their own and to discard those people on their own. So we end up in a situation where we spend a lot of our time having to allow these people to keep swimming to avoid a situation where they can capitalize on starting a mess with us, because too often we haven't been able to depend on the general public to shut those people down when it's so obvious that they don't have credibility. So there's the real answer why you don't see people like me jumping on this stuff all the time. I can't depend on the general public to discard these people. The general public, unfortunately, by and large, will just sit there and treat it like some rap beef and as entertainment. The general public needs to take an interest in what's in the best interest of the general public. And when you see things like that happen, we need the people to step in. Not step up, just step in. And stop acting like your mama and your daddy defending Creflo Dollar and Reverend Ike simply because they said one thing that was true and the rest of it's self-serving. Don't be like that. Don't do that. ADOS has been sold to you as a movement in the interests of black people, and specifically the descendants of American slaves. But you need to understand that ADOS, as constructed by those two people, is really a vehicle to promote the personal interests of Byron Allen, these two people, and now we see the Democratic Party as a whole. We don't need these two to promote the agenda of the descendants of American slaves. Continue to promote the agenda of the descendants of American slaves. I will continue to promote the agenda of the descendants of American slaves as I have done all of my life. You should do the exact same thing. But you cannot keep these two characters floating around the belfry like a couple of bats, contaminating the conversation with their schizophrenic agenda. And I would like to now make a couple of comments about how we got here. I might end up stepping on a couple of toes, but this needs to be said. And I'm only going to address this once, but this needs to be said. Exactly how is it that we got here? How is it that a couple of individuals with no credentials who haven't presented any accomplishments and whose statements run absolutely counter to what's in the interest of black people somehow end up in a position of supposedly defining where black people need to go and what we need to do? And the reason for that is because individuals with real credentials and real accomplishments unfortunately allowed these types of sycophantic interlopers and unqualified squatters into the space of credible individuals. Dr. Boyce Watkins, you have allowed your PhD that you earned, that you got honestly through your knowledge of economics, you have unfortunately allowed that to become a platform that lesser and outrageously unqualified people have been able to use for their own benefit. You have invited the likes of, well, half the dynamic duo got its credibility off of being given space on your platform. They were irrelevant and insignificant, and then your PhD and your accomplishments were freely and willfully leveraged by people who were against black people succeeding economically and handing out this ridiculous fraud that somehow we were going to progress in an economic system without economics. We just need to use politics. And she's not the only one. There has been an unfortunate track record where anything with ovaries, it seems, is allowed access to your platform without any type of vetting or qualification. And qualification isn't that they have an opinion. If their opinion runs counter to the interests of black people, if they disagree with the fundamental, essential ingredients that we need to overturn this system of oppression, then they don't need to be on a prominent platform of a legitimate personality, because that makes, if you keep bringing them back and then saying that they have a right to speak their opinion, then that's legitimizing them. And I wish I could say that it was confined to Yvette Carnell, but unfortunately, I cannot say that. I can name off half a dozen chicks, too many of them light-skinned, who apparently the only necessary qualifier that they had was possessing a set of ovaries. I don't have anything against light-skinned chicks, but I do have something against disingenuous, unqualified individuals. Now, that I have something against. They need to be sitting on a YouTube channel with 1,000 viewers, screaming and wailing their nonsense to an audience of 3 people. They do not need to be invited to sit right next to a qualified PhD who has been on national and international television multiple times, making it seem like these people have a spot or a place to be there. And part of the reason that we're dealing with this now is because, unfortunately, a man with legitimate credentials has repeatedly allowed those credentials to be hijacked simply by allowing them to be in the presence of outrageously, mortally unqualified people. And no, I haven't said anything before now. And I'm not attacking. As I said, this isn't a house wrecking. This is a house cleaning. As black men, we are the leaders. And we are supposed to sit here and have a firm stance and a firm standard so that the people are not misled. We cannot allow our platforms to be places and avenues that are used for our own personal aggrandizement or our own intellectual amusement. Our people's survival is not a matter of aggrandizement or amusement. Our people's survival is a matter of life and death. And we do a tremendous disservice to the people by ignoring that. Tremendous disservice. So I am calling on everybody who has a significant platform. We need to hit the reset button. That is what I'm calling on tonight. I'm calling on everyone. We need to hit the reset button. And this isn't a bad thing. Every once in a while, you got to stop and you got to regroup. You got to stop and regroup and reorganize and get your crew back together on the football field. They do it after every single play. You got to fall back and regroup and then launch the next offensive. So there's nothing wrong with this. But it is time for everybody to get on code. It is time for everyone to acknowledge that, number one, there is a code, and number two, you got to be on it. And that we're not going to allow any more unqualified individuals to have space to speak. Too much of that has occurred. I don't say this to attack people. I'm saying, brothers, we destroy our own credibility and leave it open to other people when we do that. You cannot have these obvious know-nothings, con men, disruptors, conflictors. We don't need to have any of that in our space. We don't need to make excuses for keeping them around. Whatever, quote, unquote, good these people could possibly do is absolutely outweighed by the catastrophic damage that their presence does. And we destroy our own credibility by ignoring it, or worse, by giving them room and then giving them excuses. We need to toe the hard line. We need to have a zero tolerance policy. The circle needs to become much smaller than it is. And anyone who refuses to hold at this hard line, you are going to find yourself delegitimized. Let me be very clear in what I say tonight at that. If you refuse to do this, if you continue to allow in unqualified, disreputable people, you are going to sacrifice your own credibility in the process. I gave you, Antonio, every opportunity to clean up your act. You roundly refused. I'm giving everyone else an opportunity to do that as well. This is shameful and disgraceful. It is unworthy of the elder gods of state and the ancestors that have come before us. It is unworthy of Marcus Garvey to allow in these types of individuals. It's unworthy of Malcolm X to allow in disreputable individuals. It's unworthy of Fred Hampton to allow in counterproductive people. So I'm calling tonight to hit the reset button. I'm calling on all of you as the people to hold that standard. And since I did not say it plainly during that particular conversation, I will say it plainly now. It is incumbent upon the people to hold the hard line. It is incumbent upon the people that if you see any of us inviting in false doctrine, promoting false prophets, it is incumbent upon the people to hold the hard line. Inviting in false prophets does not mean you had a conversation. Inviting in false prophets means you are promoting them. That they continue to have repeated access to your platforms. I don't blame anybody who talked to someone and then later something screwball came out. It's happened in Hidden Colors. It's happened to Black Channel Films. I've been a bit more strident than anybody else has been. If someone's been in my film and they said something that was off code, I'm a hardliner. It's who I am. It's what I do. I'm not diplomatic about it. I'm a hardliner. Damn right I am. I push the hard line and I hold it. And if I see somebody repeatedly doing things that are off code, I am not going to put the interests of my documentary above the interests of my people. If the person had something valuable to contribute to the film, okay, that's one thing. But that's not going to be the only thing. And if you had said this before you had been in the film, you might not have made it. In the interest of my people, because the platform that I have, if I continue extending my platform to people who are not credible, then my credibility is likewise going to come into question. And we don't have a bunch of people. We don't have a bunch of people to spare. Can I just say it like that? All right, fine. We don't have a bunch of people to spare. We don't. We don't have a bunch of people that we can afford to lose, quite frankly. If you eliminated Tariq tomorrow, who's going to put out the documentary work that has changed the national conversation? You got Black Channel Films and nobody. One place is not going to be able to carry it. Tariq didn't carry it by himself. We can't carry it by ourselves. That's not the way it works. We are either going to all stand together or we're going to hang individually. Or better yet, we're going to hang together. But it's going to be incumbent on all of us that this will be the new way under the sun. This doesn't mean that we don't give people a chance to correct, but we don't give them eternal chances to correct. After your first mistake, you need to be notified. That's a problem. If we see you go back and do it again, that's not a problem. That's a pattern. And at some point, the interests of the people have to supersede everything else. Nothing is more important than what's in the interest of the people. Nothing. Now, I want you to understand that this isn't a breakdown, this is a build-up. We are going to take this as our opportunity to strategically regroup. We are not going to abandon the interests of the descendants of American slaves. We are going to seize it. Or should I say, take it back from these would-be usurpers who have told themselves that they are going to just detour us into something else. Byron Allen's lawsuit is Byron Allen's lawsuit. If it succeeds, that's great. If it doesn't, we're right where we are right now. We didn't actually lose nothing. Could we potentially gain something from it? Maybe. I don't know. It's not very clear. All I know is that we haven't had the protections of the Civil Rights Act of 1866, and to attempt to claim that somehow we have just simply solidifies why you are a lawyer who cannot read the law. This is our moment. Not Jason Black's, not Black Channel Films. It's our moment as a people. And ego is the enemy of the people. And small-minded individuals who've had to deal with a lifetime of struggling with learning disabilities, who made it to adulthood and are now bringing those emotional imbalances into the public with them, that's not to be taken. We're not gonna have any tolerance for that. This thing is bigger than all of us. It is bigger than all of us. It is about changing the course of history. Black people have not had a solidified agenda since we left the plantations, since the beginning of the civil rights movement, which was itself detoured off into something else that had nothing to do with civil rights. Integration had nothing to do with civil rights. And this is our opportunity to correct this. But you cannot do that if you are deceived. So tonight, I want you all to recommit yourselves to the cause of Black empowerment, not Byron empowerment. I want you to recommit yourselves to the cause of descendants of American slaves, not ADOS, but to the descendants of American slaves. You do not have to give up your t-shirts. You can keep those. Keep your ADOS t-shirts. Keep your ADOS hashtag. Keep the ADOS, the spirit of the ADOS movement and the true purpose that you came to it for. But I just want to ask you, did you really start saying ADOS because you were thinking about Byron Allen? Did you start saying ADOS because you didn't think economics was the answer? You thought politics was the answer? Did you start saying ADOS because you believed in Antonio, or because you believed in being an African who happens to be in America? Why did you do this? Just because you might not have seen it as quickly as I or some other people did, I'm not holding that against you. I'm holding you to account for everything you do from this day forward. I'm telling you all, join with me. I'm telling you all that the New York Times is on the run because we put them on the run. I'm telling you that I'm not here for ego. I am here for you. I am here for the agenda. I'm not going to sit here and geek out and fanboy out because the New York Times mentioned me. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to sit here and talk about we here, my people ain't gone nowhere. Who's we? We here, we where? The New York Times mentioned us. We here. Where's here? No, little unaccomplished people who've never had anything in their lives that they've been able to be proud of. They're the ones who geek out and get all giddy and excited. I'm a soldier. I don't get excited because we won one skirmish or we won one battle. I mark down that we've made progress, but I'm not holding any parades and I'm not celebrating. I don't need anybody to sing my praises, carry my banners, or praise my name. I've never asked any of you to do that. Antonio Moore wants his face out there because he needs the attention. He needs the validation. I don't give a damn if I drop dead tomorrow, pick up my sword, and continue the battle. But Jason, we wouldn't even remember your name. What good would it do for people to remember my name and they're dead? No, sacrifice the name of Jason Black and spare the people. May his name never be said. May his name never be remembered and the people survive. I don't need credibility. My people's survival and prosperity is all of the thanks. It is all of the validation. It is all of the credibility that I need. That's why I'm doing this. There are no Democrats pulling my strings and telling me, now you can tell them vote down ballot. But tell them they got to vote Democrat, though. I'm at war. And that war isn't led by our dumbest and densest. That war is being led by our best and brightest. So if you want to know where I stand on this issue, this is where I stand. And I believe I speak for Intelligent Black Society. This is where we stand. And if you all have noticed, the new black media has been united in what we're saying. So nobody can claim that we've been downing this character from day one. Nobody can claim that. I've shown you the documentation that he's been a little messy individual running around behind the scenes and in public trying to sow all manner of conflict and discord. And what I'm telling you is that he's out. He has no place among the people. He doesn't have anything to say. He doesn't have proper command of the English language to say anything. I don't want some mumble-mouthed dude a lawyer who can't read a law and can't understand a newspaper article to be my spokesperson. He doesn't have command of the language, much less the subject matter, to be able to speak on our behalf. You've already made your contribution. You came up with a catchy hashtag. It's time to move on. Without you. We don't traffic in egos over here. We traffic in accomplishments. There's not really a place for you. If your ego needs help, get therapy. Making YouTube videos is not a substitute for counseling. And to the people, I want to salute all of you who have helped to make this the issue. I want to salute all of you, those of you who've been wearing ADOS, those of you who've shown up on the Supreme Court. You mean well. You are good people. I salute you. I support you. And I am saying to you, it's time to have some introspection. It is time to be brutally honest about where we are and how we got here. It is time to get back to the work of promoting the agenda of reparations, not the agenda of two individuals who are hoping to fake it until they make it. And this concludes tonight's special broadcast of the BlackChannel.net radio program, the No Thanksgiving program. Because while other people are off simulating being pilgrims, we are here doing the work of the people, as we have always done. White supremacy does not take a day off, neither do we. Welcome to the haven of intelligent black thought. If you have not clicked the subscribe button, do that now. If you have not clicked the yellow notification bell so you can be notified when we're broadcasting, do that now. And if you haven't been to our website, blackchannelfilms.com, that is blackchannelfilms.com, where we do our own media, Amazon bestsellers. We're not begging P. Diddy to give us a seat at the table, and we're not upset if he didn't give us one. I don't get upset at not having a seat at other people's tables because I know how to build my own. And Black Channel Films is the table we've set. Go there, get gamed up. Welcome to the revolution. And this concludes tonight's broadcast of the BlackChannel.net radio program. I am your host, your brother, your humble servant, the Black Authority. And until next time, my brothers and my sisters from around the world, remember, black is the future, and the future is making it.